Hey there, and welcome back to another journey through the darker corners of history. Tonight, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on one of the most romanticized periods in human civilization. We're talking about medieval princesses, and trust me, what you're about to discover will shatter every fairy tale you've ever been told. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you're ready to have your assumptions completely demolished, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's wild to think some of you might be having morning coffee in Berlin while I'm recording this late at night here in California. Now, settle in somewhere comfortable. Grab your favorite blanket. Maybe dim those lights a bit, because we're about to transport ourselves back to an era where being born a princess wasn't a blessing. It was often a death sentence wrapped in silk and gold. Picture this. It's the year 1300. And you've just been born into European royalty. Congratulations, you've won the medieval lottery, right? Wrong. Statistically speaking, you have a 1 in 3 chance of dying before you see your 30th birthday. Those aren't odds you'd take to Vegas, but they were the brutal reality for royal women in the Middle Ages. Forget everything Disney taught you about princess life. There were no singing birds helping you get dressed. No fairy godmothers granting wishes, and definitely no Prince Charming riding up on a white horse to rescue you from your troubles. Instead, there were arranged marriages to complete strangers, pregnancies that could kill you, and a life so rigidly controlled that privacy was literally a foreign concept. Let's start with something as basic as waking up. In our modern world, you might roll out of bed, stumble to the bathroom, maybe check your phone. For a medieval princess, morning began in a stone chamber so cold you could see your breath before you even opened your eyes. We're talking bone-deep, marrow-freezing cold that no amount of royal privilege could completely banish. Your bed wasn't the memory foam paradise you're used to. It was straw, actual straw, stuffed into a rough cloth sack, and you weren't sleeping alone. Mice had made themselves comfortable in that straw, along with fleas, bedbugs, and whatever other creatures found royal bedding as appealing as you did. The rustling sounds in the night weren't your imagination, they were your roommates. Darkness dominated these medieval mornings because electricity wouldn't exist for another 5 centuries. No light switches, no bedside lamps, just thick, oppressive blackness, broken only by narrow window slits that let in more frigid air than actual illumination. And the smell. Oh, the smell. Medieval castles weren't exactly known for their ventilation systems. You'd wake to the musty dampness of perpetually wet stone walls, the sharp tang of chamber pots because bathrooms didn't exist, and the distinctive aroma of unwashed human bodies because bathing was rare, especially in winter. But here's where it gets really interesting. You weren't waking up alone. Privacy, that fundamental human desire we take for granted, simply didn't exist for medieval princesses. Your ladies-in-waiting slept in the same room, one of them literally at the foot of your bed, listening to every snore, watching every movement. From the moment you opened your eyes until you closed them at night, someone was always watching, always present, always judging. "Morning, my lady." The voice would startle you awake, spoken by women whose entire existence revolved around your daily routine. These weren't friends in the modern sense. They were servants, spies, and competitors all rolled into one, sent by other noble families to serve you while simultaneously reporting back on your every word and action. Getting dressed wasn't the simple affair you know today. Forget slipping into comfortable clothes and heading out the door. Medieval royal clothing was designed for one purpose: displaying wealth and status. Comfort be damned. Layer after layer of clothing would be wrestled onto your body. First the linen shift, the only piece that got washed with any regularity. Then the cotta, a long-sleeved dress that laced up the sides or back. Next came the surco, an overdress with sleeves so elaborate and ridiculous that doing anything practical became impossible without help. Your feet were stuffed into leather slippers that offered zero support, and even less warmth against stone floors that felt like ice. Your hair, considered too tempting and sensual to be seen in public, had to be completely covered with a linen veil, not the tall, pointed hats from fairy tale illustrations. Those came later. We're talking about something more like a nun's wimple, covering your hair, neck, and framing your face in white cloth. And here's something that might shock you. This elaborate morning routine wasn't optional. Every single day began with mandatory prayers in the castle chapel. Didn't matter if you were sick, tired, or just wanted 5 more minutes of sleep. God came first, always, and as a princess, you needed to set the religious example for the entire household. The chapel would be packed with everyone from your father, the king or powerful duke, down to the lowest servants. But notice the arrangement. Your father at the front, your mother beside him if she was still alive, childbirth being a frequent killer of medieval women. Your brothers, if you had any, stood near your father. You and any sisters stood behind the men, because that was your place in medieval society, always behind the men. These prayers lasted at least an hour, standing on cold stone floors in thin slippers while your empty stomach growled. No breakfast until God was properly honoured. The priest would drone on in Latin, words you understood only partially despite hearing them every day of your life. Full comprehension wasn't expected of you anyway. You were female. Your job was to look pious, follow along with the responses, and set a good example. When prayers finally ended, you'd shuffle to the Great Hall for breakfast, but don't get excited about medieval royal cuisine. We're not talking about fluffy pancakes and crispy bacon. Breakfast was dense, coarse bread that could double as a doorstop, maybe some ale, yes, even in the morning, or watered wine if you were particularly fortunate. Perhaps some cheese if it was available, maybe an egg if the chickens were feeling generous. That was it, and you didn't eat alone. The hall was packed with soldiers, servants, clerks, visitors, everyone eating together while your family sat at the high table, elevated above everyone else like living displays of royal authority. Privacy still wasn't a thing. Your every bite was observed, your every expression noted and potentially reported. But here's where your real education in medieval princess life began. During breakfast, your father might summon you for a private conversation. And trust me, when medieval fathers wanted to speak with their daughters, it was rarely good news. It usually meant one thing: developments in your marriage negotiations. Because here's the brutal truth about being a medieval princess. You weren't a person with dreams, ambitions, or choices. You were a political asset, a valuable commodity to be traded for alliances, peace treaties, or territorial gains. Your personal feelings about any of this were completely irrelevant. You might be 13 years old, just 13, but you were already considered marriageable. Girls could be betrothed as infants and married at 12, the minimum age set by the church. Your education wasn't designed to fulfill your potential or help you discover your passions. It was specifically crafted to make you valuable marriage material. You learned household management, basic medical skills, needlework, maybe some music if your family valued those accomplishments. Reading was possible, though not guaranteed for all noble women. Writing was even less common. Languages might be taught if you were expected to make a foreign marriage, which was likely since political alliances often meant leaving your homeland forever. But perhaps most importantly, you were taught from the earliest age that your body didn't belong to you. It belonged to your family until marriage, then to your husband afterward. Its primary purpose was producing heirs. Preferred was essentially a death lottery. No modern medicine, no understandingly male ones. And childbirth in the medieval period of germs or infection. No pain relief beyond herbs and desperate prayers. Women died in childbirth constantly. Queens, princesses, peasants. It didn't matter. The best medical care available still couldn't prevent bleeding, infection, or exhaustion from claiming countless lives. And if you survived one birth, you were expected to go through it again and again, as many times as necessary would end, and your father would motion for you to follow him to his family lineage. The meal to produce enough sons to secure the private chamber. This was it. Whatever political development had occurred, whatever alliance had been proposed or treaty negotiated, you were about to learn how your life had been decided without your input. As you walk through those stone corridors, you might catch a glimpse through a window of young squires practicing swordplay in the courtyard below. They were laughing, free in to learn fighting, strategy, horsemanship, all forbidden to you because ways you would never be. They got you a female. Their futures would be determined largely by their abilities and royal. The heavy wooden door to your father's chamber, wooden choices. Yours had been determined the moment you were born, femaled creak open, and you'd be ushered into a room that displayed the true wealth of your family. Tapestries lined the walls, keeping out drafts while showing off hunting scenes and family crests. A fire roared in the hearth, making this the warmest room in the castle. Your father had an actual desk, a piece of furniture dedicated solely to writing and business, covered with parchments, quills, and his personal seal. Daughter, he might say, not bothering with your actual name because medieval fathers, especially royal ones, weren't exactly the warm, fuzzy type. The King of France has proposed a match between you and his second son, and there it was. Your future decided in a single sentence. You didn't know this prince. You'd never met him. You had no idea if he was kind or cruel, intelligent or stupid, handsome or hideous. None of that mattered. What mattered was that France was powerful, and this alliance would benefit your family politically. The terms are favourable, your father would continue, as if discussing the sale of livestock rather than your entire existence. Your dowry will include the northern territories, and in return, we will receive trade rights through French ports. You were 13 years old. You'd never left your homeland. You didn't speak French fluently, and now you were expected to leave everything behind, travel to a foreign country, marry a stranger, share his bed, bear his children, and run his household, all while being watched and judged by a court that would see you as an outsider. When? Might be all you could manage to ask. Your voice barely a whisper, as you realised your life as you knew it had just been given an expiration date. The betrothal will be announced at Michaelmas. The wedding will take place next spring, after you turn 14, your father would say, finally looking at you directly. This is a good match, better than I hoped for. You will bring honour to our family. Translation: be grateful. Some girls were sold off to men 3 times their age. Some were sent to courts, even more foreign and hostile. Some were married to secure peace with enemies who hated them from the moment they arrived. By medieval royal standards, this might actually be considered a decent arrangement. Yes, father, you'd say, because there was nothing else to say, no point in crying or begging. It wouldn't change anything. This was your duty, your purpose, the reason you'd been born. As you left your father's chamber, the reality of your situation would begin to settle like a stone in your stomach. You had less than a year left in the only home you'd ever known, speaking the language you understood, surrounded by people whose customs and expectations you'd grown up with. After that, you'd belong to France, to Prince Philip, to a life being thrust upon you without your consent. But the day wasn't over. There was no time to process this life-changing news, no therapist to talk to, no understanding parent to offer comfort. Medieval princesses didn't get to fall apart. There was just the relentless schedule that would continue until the moment you were shipped off to your new country. Your afternoons were filled with lessons designed to increase your value as a diplomatic asset. Languages became critical now that your French marriage was confirmed. Your tutor, Lady Catherine, was a stern woman who'd spent time at the French court and never let anyone forget it. She carried a small wooden paddle that she'd use to rap your knuckles when you mispronounce words. By the end of most lessons, your fingers were red and swollen, but medieval education operated on a simple principle: success or failure. With failure, meaning punishment. Bonjour, mademoiselle! She'd snap in French, expecting immediate comprehension and perfect pronunciation. When you stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds, when your English tongue couldn't quite form the nasal vowels that didn't exist in your native language, down would come that paddle. Pain shot up your arm, but you learned not to cry out. Princesses didn't show pain. Your French lessons were followed by needlework, the one skill every noble girl mastered from childhood. But this wasn't casual embroidery. You were creating elaborate religious scenes using silk threads imported at enormous expense from the East, dyed in colours that cost more than what a peasant family earned in a year. The gold thread you used for angel halos was actual gold, pounded thin and wrapped around silk cores. Your family's wealth was literally being woven into fabric. Smaller stitches, your attendants would remind you constantly. A French lady would use stitches so small they can barely be seen. You'd sigh and pull out entire rows of work, starting again while your back ached from hunching over the frame and your eyes strained in the dim castle light. Between lessons came household management training, because after marriage, you'd become the administrator of your husband's estate, responsible for everything from provisioning kitchens to overseeing servants to maintaining financial accounts. Brother Thomas, a monk who served as the castle's clerk and accountant, would arrive with wax tablets covered in Roman numerals. Calculate the cost of feeding the household for 1 month, he'd instruct, setting before you tedious mathematical problems that took forever to solve. Arabic numerals existed, but weren't widely used in Europe yet, so calculations that would take us seconds required long, frustrating minutes of converting measures and values. How many shillings to the pound? How many pence to the shilling? How many bushels of wheat to feed how many people for how many days? A lady who cannot manage her household is at the mercy of dishonest stewards and thieving servants, Brother Thomas would warn when you made errors. And he was right. In the medieval world, numerical literacy was as crucial as reading for noble women. You'd be managing vast estates, overseeing hundreds of workers. If you couldn't budget properly or detect fraud, your household would fall into chaos, reflecting poorly on both you and your husband. After mathematics came music, another essential accomplishment that increased your value as a diplomatic tool. A princess who could entertain at court was more useful than one who couldn't. Sister Agnes from the local convent would arrive with a small harp, much smaller than modern concert harps, designed to be portable and played in a lady's chamber. Your fingering has improved, she might say as you plucked carefully at the strings, but your timing still falters in the middle section. Medieval music was primarily religious, hymns and psalms and devotional pieces. Secular music existed, but it wasn't considered entirely proper for young noble ladies to sing the romantic ballads of troubadours. Those would come later, when courtly love became fashionable. Your education also included what we might call medieval home economics. You learned which herbs healed and which ones killed, how to manage large households, how to preserve food for winter months. Medieval medical knowledge was primitive by our standards, but comprehensive in its own way, passed down from woman to woman across generations. You might spend hours learning to identify plants, preparing salves and tinctures, understanding that someday you'd be responsible for the health of everyone in your husband's domain. But perhaps the most crucial part of your education was learning to navigate court politics. This wasn't taught formally, but absorbed through observation and experience. You learned to read the subtle signs of approval and disapproval, to understand who held real power beyond official titles, to recognize when seemingly casual conversations were actually diplomatic negotiations. Medieval courts were battlefields without swords, where words were weapons and alliances were armor. Women, unable to settle disputes through physical combat like men, had to be cleverer, more patient, more skilled at reading human nature. A misplaced word, a perceived slight. A failure to show proper deference could have consequences that rippled through generations. Your mother, when she occasionally appeared for these informal lessons, would offer advice that was both practical and chilling. "Remember," she might say while working on embroidery, "everyone at court is watching for weakness. Never let them see doubt, never show fear, and never forget that your first loyalty must be to your husband's family once you marry." The weight of this responsibility was staggering. You weren't just representing yourself, but your birth family's honor, your new family's reputation, and the diplomatic relationship between two powerful kingdoms. Every gesture would be scrutinized, every decision analyzed for political implications. As winter deepened and your departure date approached, preparations intensified. New gowns were commissioned in the French style, cut differently from English fashions, requiring you to learn new ways of moving and sitting. French ladies-in-waiting arrived to begin your cultural transformation, women selected not just for their expertise, but for their loyalty to your future husband's family. These women weren't there to befriend you. They were there to reshape you, to smooth away your English habits and replace them with French customs. They corrected your posture, your speech, your table manners, even the way you walked. French ladies show more confidence, they'd instruct, tapping between your shoulder blades when you fell back into English postures. The constant correction was exhausting. This relentless reshaping of habits formed over your entire lifetime. But there was no time for rest, no space for complaint. Your wedding date approached with the inevitability of the tide, and you had to be ready to represent your new country properly. During this period, you might receive your first letter from Prince Philip, carefully crafted diplomatic correspondence that revealed nothing of his personality while expressing appropriate pleasure at the upcoming union. These letters were read by multiple people before reaching you, analysed for political implications, and your responses would be similarly scrutinised before being sent. The strange thing was, despite all this preparation, despite months of learning about French customs and language, you still knew virtually nothing about the man you'd be married to. Was he kind, cruel, intelligent, dull? Would he expect immediate intimacy or allow you time to adjust? These weren't questions anyone thought to answer because they weren't considered relevant to the political arrangement. As spring approached and your departure became imminent, the castle atmosphere changed. There was excitement among some courtiers about the prestigious alliance, anxiety among others about losing their princess to a foreign power. Your own emotions were a confused tangle of fear, curiosity, and resignation that you couldn't untangle even in your private moments. The final weeks brought a flurry of farewell visits from relatives and family allies, each offering advice that ranged from practical to contradictory. Some urged you to maintain English customs to honour your heritage. Others insisted you must become completely French to succeed at your new court. The pressure was overwhelming, the expectations impossible to reconcile. Your trousseau, the collection of clothes and household items you'd take to France, filled multiple trunks. Fine linens, embroidered gowns, jewellery, books, religious items, even furniture deemed suitable for a French princess's chambers. Each item had been selected not just for its quality, but for its diplomatic message, representing English craftsmanship and wealth, while remaining appropriate for French tastes. Your personal possessions told the story of a life in transition. Books in English that you might never read again, pressed flowers from your childhood garden that would crumble to dust in French soil, small trinkets and keepsakes that connected you to memories you'd soon be forced to leave behind. These items felt precious beyond their material value because they were the last tangible links to the girl you'd been before becoming a political instrument. But perhaps the most emotionally charged part of your preparation was selecting which of your current attendants would accompany you to France. The harsh reality was that most of your English household would remain behind. You'd be allowed to bring perhaps 3 or 4 familiar faces, while the majority of your new household would be French women chosen by your husband's family. These French ladies weren't selected for their compatibility with your personality or their ability to provide comfort during your adjustment. They were chosen for their loyalty to your new family, their knowledge of court protocol, and their willingness to report on your behavior during those crucial early months when your adaptation would be most closely scrutinized. The emotional weight of these farewells began long before your actual departure. Women who'd cared for you since childhood, who'd taught you to embroider and sing, who'd comforted you during illnesses and celebrated your small triumphs, would be dismissed from your service. Some might find positions with other noble families. Others would return to their own families, but your connection to them would be severed as cleanly as a blade through silk. Alice, your personal maid, was among the few selected to accompany you. The relief you felt at this news was overwhelming, though you tried not to show it. Alice had been with you since you were 7 years old. She knew your habits, your fears, your preferences in ways that felt almost supernatural. In the terrifying unknown of your French future, her familiar presence would be a lifeline to your former self. But even Alice would be transformed by the journey. She'd need to learn French customs too, understand the hierarchy of your new household, navigate relationships with French servants, who might view English attendants as interlopers. The burden of adaptation wouldn't fall on you alone, but on everyone foolish enough to follow you into exile. As your departure date solidified, you began experiencing what we might now recognize as anticipatory grief. You found yourself memorizing details you'd previously taken for granted. The way morning light fell across the chapel stones during prayers, the particular echo of footsteps in your favorite corridor, the view from your chamber window overlooking the practice yard, where those free young men continued their combat training. Food became another source of melancholy. English dishes you'd eaten without thought suddenly seemed precious. The specific way your castle's cooks prepared roasted fowl, the honey from your family's beehives, even the coarse bread you'd often complained about now carried emotional weight. French cuisine would be different, prepared according to foreign tastes and traditions that you'd need to develop appreciation for whether you actually enjoyed them or not. Your relationship with your parents shifted during these final months too. Your father, having completed the political negotiations, seemed to view his paternal duties as essentially finished. You were no longer his responsibility, but a French asset waiting for delivery. His interactions with you became increasingly formal, treating you more like a visiting dignitary than his daughter. Your mother's behavior was more complex. She began sharing fragments of practical wisdom about marriage and court survival that she'd never discussed before. These weren't warm, intimate conversations, but rather strategic briefings from one royal woman to another. She taught you how to identify trustworthy servants, how to detect poison in food, how to maintain dignity during the physical aspects of marriage, how to protect yourself during the dangerous months of pregnancy and childbirth. Never let them see you weak, she'd advise while reviewing your posture during formal occasions. Vulnerability invites attack in ways you cannot yet imagine. Smile when you must, but trust sparingly and never completely. These lessons carried the weight of her own experience as a foreign bride who'd successfully navigated the treacherous waters of medieval royal marriage. She'd survived, adapted, produced heirs, and maintained her position for decades. Her advice wasn't affectionate, but it was invaluable. The religious preparation for your departure was equally intense. Father Ambrose scheduled additional confession sessions, ensuring your soul was properly prepared for the spiritual challenges of living in a foreign land with different religious traditions. Even though France was Catholic like England, regional variations in practice, feast day celebrations, and ecclesiastical politics could create unexpected complications. Remember that you represent not just your family, but English Christianity, he'd remind you during these sessions. Your behavior reflects on our faith as well as our kingdom. Maintain your devotions, attend Mass regularly, and never compromise on matters of doctrine. You were also required to memorize prayers in French, learn the names and feast days of French patron saints, and understand the religious calendar as observed in your new homeland. This spiritual education felt like another layer of identity being stripped away and replaced, another aspect of yourself being subordinated to political necessity. The physical preparations were equally demanding. French ladies, it seemed, maintained different beauty standards than their English counterparts. Your skin needed to be paler, achieved through careful avoidance of sunlight and application of various whitening compounds. Your hair required different styling, learning to arrange it according to French fashions that were more elaborate and time-consuming than English customs. Even your posture and movements needed adjustment. French noble ladies walked differently, held their hands differently, even breathed differently according to the court instructors brought in to perfect your transformation. Every gesture carried meaning in the complex language of aristocratic behavior, and mistakes could be interpreted as disrespect or worse, evidence of poor breeding. Your voice required training too. Not just learning French pronunciation, but modulating your tone and volume according to French expectations. English noble ladies were apparently more direct in their speech patterns, while French court culture demanded more subtle, indirect communication styles. You practiced conversations where saying one thing while meaning another was considered sophisticated rather than deceptive. Dancing lessons intensified as your departure approached. French court dances were more complex than English ones, requiring perfect synchronization between partners and flawless execution of intricate steps. These weren't just entertainment, but political theatre, where your grace and skill would be judged as reflections of your breeding and education. Master Henri, your French dance instructor, was particularly demanding during these final lessons. At the French court, everyone watches for mistakes, he'd warn while correcting your footwork for the 100th time. A stumble during the pavane could be discussed for weeks, interpreted as everything from nervousness to incompetence to intentional slight. The pressure of these expectations was suffocating. Every aspect of your behavior, from the way you held your eating knife to the angle of your head during conversation, would be analyzed and discussed by people looking for reasons to find you inadequate. The margin for error was essentially non-existent. During this period, you also began receiving gifts from English nobles, who wanted to ensure you remembered them favorably when you gained influence at the French court. These presents ranged from beautiful but impractical jewelry to books of English poetry to religious relics supposedly blessed by English saints. Each gift came with carefully worded messages expressing hopes for continued friendship between your families. Some of these offerings were genuinely thoughtful, items selected because the givers knew your personal preferences or interests. Others were obviously calculated, expensive displays of wealth designed to impress rather than please. Learning to distinguish between genuine goodwill and political maneuvering was another skill you'd need to master before leaving home. Your younger siblings, if you had any, began treating you differently too. You were becoming a figure from their past rather than a present reality. The games you'd played together, the secrets you'd shared, the casual intimacy of family life gradually gave way to more formal interactions appropriate for your new status as a foreign princess. This distancing was probably protective for them, making your eventual departure less emotionally devastating. But it added to your sense of isolation during these final months, as if you were already becoming a ghost in your own family's life. The servants' attitudes shifted as well. Those who'd known you since childhood struggled with how to interact with someone who was simultaneously still their young lady and a future French princess. Some became more deferential, treating you with the formal respect due to foreign royalty. Others seemed to withdraw emotionally, perhaps protecting themselves from the pain of losing someone they'd cared for. Kitchen staff began preparing your favorite dishes more frequently, a kind gesture that felt both touching and melancholy. These women understood that soon you'd be eating foreign food prepared by foreign hands, that these familiar flavors would become precious memories rather than daily experiences. The stable masters made sure you had opportunities to ride your favorite horses, knowing that French mounts would have different temperaments and training. Even the castle dogs seemed to sense the approaching change, following you more closely during your daily walks, as if trying to memorize your scent and presence. All of these small kindnesses and adjustments created an atmosphere of impending loss that permeated your final months at home. Everyone was preparing for your absence, adapting to the reality that you'd soon exist, only in memory, and occasional letters that might take weeks to arrive and would be read by multiple people before reaching their intended recipients. Your education during this period took on new urgency. Every lesson felt crucial because you'd soon be operating without the safety net of familiar advisors and friendly faces. Mistakes that might be forgiven at your father's court could have serious consequences in a foreign environment where you lacked established relationships and cultural understanding. The weight of representing not just yourself, but your entire homeland pressed down on you with increasing intensity. You weren't just a 13-year-old girl leaving home. You were a diplomatic mission in human form, a living symbol of alliance between sometimes hostile powers, a political investment that needed to succeed for the benefit of countless people who would never know your name. As winter finally began loosening its grip on the countryside and the first tentative signs of spring appeared, your departure date became fixed and final. The betrothal ceremony would take place at Easter, followed immediately by your journey to France. No more delays, no more preparation time, no more childhood. The girl you'd been was about to disappear forever, replaced by a French princess whose life would be dedicated to serving interests larger than herself. Whether she'd find happiness, fulfillment, or even basic contentment in that role remained to be seen. But ready or not, medieval history was about to sweep you up in its relentless current, carrying you toward a destiny that had been decided by others long before you were old enough to understand what destiny meant. The morning of your betrothal ceremony arrives with the inevitability of sunrise, though the sky remains grey and threatening. You're awakened before dawn by hands that aren't Alice's, women you barely recognise who've been assigned the honour of preparing England's soon-to-be former princess for her ceremonial transition to French property. The ritual of transformation begins immediately. First comes a bath, an extraordinary luxury in medieval times, especially during the colder months. The water is scented with herbs and flower petals that have been carefully selected for their symbolic meaning. Rosemary for remembrance, lavender for devotion, rose petals for the love you're supposed to develop for your new homeland. The irony isn't lost on you, soaking in metaphors while your actual feelings remain irrelevant to everyone involved. Layer upon layer of clothing follows. This isn't your everyday court dress, but something far more elaborate, designed specifically for this moment when you'll be displayed like a prize before assembled nobles from both kingdoms. The undergarments alone are more complex than most people's entire wardrobes. Silk against your skin, followed by increasingly ornate layers that transform your teenage body into a walking advertisement for your family's wealth and political connections. The gown itself is a masterpiece of diplomatic messaging. English silk embroidered with gold thread, cut in a style that acknowledges French fashions while maintaining distinctly English elements. Every stitch has been calculated to send the right political signals, to demonstrate respect for your future homeland while proudly displaying your origins. You're wearing foreign policy in fabric form. Your hair receives similar attention, washed with expensive soaps, dried before a roaring fire, then arranged in elaborate braids that incorporate both English and French styling techniques. Unlike normal days when your hair would be completely covered, today portions remain visible, a symbol of your unmarried state that will change during the ceremony itself when your head becomes fully veiled to indicate your new status as a wife. Jewellery comes next, pieces selected not for beauty but for their political significance. A necklace that belonged to your great-grandmother connecting you to generations of English royalty. Earrings gifted by the French delegation, acknowledging your future allegiance. Rings that represent various territorial claims and dynastic connections. You're being decorated like a Christmas tree, each ornament carrying historical weight that makes your young shoulders ache. Through all this preparation, you remain oddly detached, as if watching someone else being dressed for someone else's life. The girl in the polished metal mirror looks familiar but foreign, like a portrait painted by an artist who'd only heard descriptions of your face. Beautiful, certainly, but in a way that feels calculated rather than natural. The Great Hall has been transformed overnight into something that barely resembles its everyday appearance. Fresh rushes mixed with wild flowers cover the stone floors, their sweet scent competing with the smoke from hundreds of candles that illuminate every corner. Tapestries depicting scenes from the lives of married saints hang from the walls, their embroidered faces watching with expressions that seem either blessing or warning, depending on your state of mind. English nobles fill every available space, dressed in their finest garments, many wearing colours they can't normally afford, just to make proper impressions on the French delegation. These are people you've known your entire life, yet today they look at you differently, as if you've already begun your transformation from familiar princess to diplomatic curiosity. The French representatives occupy positions of honour near the altar, their more elaborate clothing and sophisticated mannerisms, making the English court appear provincial by comparison. They examine you with the cool assessment of buyers evaluating expensive merchandise, noting your posture, your expression, your apparent health and breeding potential. Your father offers his arm to escort you down the aisle, and for a moment his grip feels almost protective. But when you glance at his face, you see satisfaction rather than paternal emotion. He's successfully negotiated a prestigious alliance, secured favourable terms, strengthened his kingdom's position. Your personal feelings about any of this remain as irrelevant to him as they are to everyone else present. The ceremony itself passes in a blur of Latin phrases and symbolic gestures you've rehearsed countless times, but which feel surreal when performed for real. You speak your responses automatically, having memorized them so thoroughly that your mouth moves without conscious thought from your brain. Your hand extends when prompted, feeling the weight of the ring as Lord Bertrand, standing in for the absent Prince Philip, slides it onto your finger with impersonal efficiency. And just like that, you're married. Not physically, since the marriage won't be consummated until you reach France and meet your actual husband, but legally, politically, diplomatically. In the eyes of both churches and both kingdoms, you've just become French property rather than English. The girl who woke up this morning in her childhood bedroom no longer exists. In her place stands a French princess whose primary residence happens to be temporarily located in England. The feast that follows is more elaborate than anything you've experienced before. Course after course of expensive delicacies that demonstrate your family's wealth to the French delegation while honouring your new status. You sit in the place of honour, now officially a French princess rather than an English one, with Lord Bertrand having completed his proxy duty and returned to his place with the other French representatives. The empty seat beside you serves as a constant reminder of your husband's absence, of the strange limbo you now inhabit as a married virgin, a wife without a husband. Throughout the meal, you receive gifts from assembled nobles, each presentation accompanied by formal phrases of congratulation that sound rehearsed rather than heartfelt. Gold cups, religious reliquaries, illuminated prayer books, jewellery to adorn your person and your future French home. Your French has improved enough that you can respond appropriately without translation. A small victory that draws approving nods from the French delegation. Every word you speak, every gesture you make, every expression that crosses your face is being evaluated and filed away for future reference. You're a curiosity now, a success story in the medieval marriage market whose value has just increased dramatically. But beneath the pleasant conversation and beautiful surroundings, anxiety gnaws at your stomach like hunger. Tonight, after the feast ends, you won't be escorted to a bridal chamber for the traditional consummation. That awaits you in France with a man you've still never met. Instead, you'll spend what might be your last night in your childhood bedroom, trying to memorize details you'll soon leave behind forever. The entertainment continues long into the evening. Musicians play elaborate pieces that showcase the sophistication of both courts. Acrobats perform feats that would be impressive under normal circumstances, but which barely register through your emotional numbness. Nobles make speeches about friendship between kingdoms, about the bright future this alliance represents, about your role as a living bridge between sometimes hostile powers. Finally, mercifully, the formal festivities begin winding down. Lady Isabel appears at your side, ready to escort you through the complex protocols of retiring from your own betrothal feast. Tomorrow will bring early departure for Dover and the Channel crossing that will carry you away from everything familiar. Your chamber feels different when you enter it for the last time, as its permanent occupant. Personal belongings have been packed into travelling trunks that line the walls like tombstones. The space echoes slightly when you move through it. Already feeling abandoned despite your continued presence, your ladies help you out of the elaborate ceremony gown, carefully folding it to be packed. You'll probably never wear it again, having served its symbolic purpose. Alice brushes your hair with the same gentle stroke she's used since you were 7 years old, and the familiar rhythm provides comfort that nothing else has managed today. In the polished metal mirror, you study your reflection, trying to memorize the face that's about to disappear into someone else's life. "Are you afraid?" you ask Alice suddenly, your voice barely above a whisper. Alice's hands pause briefly in their work before resuming their steady rhythm. "Yes, my lady," she admits quietly, but also curious. It's a grand adventure in its way. Adventure. You hadn't thought of your forced exile in those terms, had seen it only as an ending rather than a beginning. But perhaps Alice has a point. Perhaps there's something to be gained in this journey toward the unknown, even if it's not what you would have chosen for yourself. "What do you think he's like?" you venture, not needing to specify who you mean. "Prince Philip, I mean. Really like, not what the diplomats say." Alice considers this carefully before answering. "I think he's probably as nervous as you are. He didn't choose this match any more than you did. It's a startling thought. Somehow you've been imagining Prince Philip as a fully formed adult, confidently awaiting his bride's delivery, like a piece of furniture he'd ordered. But Alice is right. He's only 17, hardly more than a boy himself, also bound by duty and family expectations that have shaped his life without consulting his preferences. "Maybe he's kind," you say, sounding young even to your own ears. "Maybe you'll find friendship with each other," Alice suggests gently. "And if not, well, royal couples often lead quite separate lives once heirs are secured. You'll have your own household, your own interests. It's cold comfort, but realistic. Medieval royal marriages aren't designed for companionship or emotional fulfillment. They're business arrangements with political benefits. If personal happiness develops, that's a fortunate bonus rather than an expected outcome. Sleep comes fitfully on your last night in England, filled with dreams that mix memories of your childhood with imagined scenes from your French future. You wake several times in confusion, momentarily forgetting that today will carry you across the Channel toward your new existence. Dawn arrives grey and misty, matching your emotional state perfectly. Alice helps you dress in travelling clothes designed for comfort during the long journey ahead. The elaborate court gowns will remain packed until you need them for formal presentations in France. Today requires practical garments that can withstand hours of uncomfortable movement. The castle courtyard buzzes with organised chaos as your departure preparations reach their final stage. Horses stamp impatiently, their breath forming clouds in the chill morning air. Carts loaded with your possessions strain under the weight of everything deemed suitable to accompany a princess to her new home. Men-at-arms in your father's livery check weapons and equipment, preparing to escort you as far as Dover before French guards assume responsibility for your safety. Your parents wait near the main gate, their formal postures betraying no emotion despite the permanent nature of this farewell. Your father looks impatient to conclude this final piece of diplomatic business. Your mother's face maintains its customary mask, though you notice her fingers worrying at the edge of her sleeve in a rare display of underlying feeling. The goodbyes are restrained, appropriate for public viewing by assembled nobles and servants who've gathered to witness your departure. Your father kisses your forehead while reminding you of your duty to represent England honourably at the French court. Your mother embraces you briefly, whispering words meant for your ears alone. "Remember who you are," she murmurs against your hair. "Whatever else happens, whatever you must become, remember who you were born to be." Then it's over. Lord Bertrand, who will escort you to France, bows deeply while informing everyone that the tide waits for no one, not even royalty. The castle gates swing open, revealing the road that will carry you toward your destiny, whether you're ready or not. You mount the palfrey chosen for your journey, a gentle mare selected for comfort during the long ride to Dover. Alice and your other English ladies are similarly mounted nearby, their faces mixing anxiety with curiosity about the adventure ahead. Around you, the full procession forms, an impressive display of wealth and importance that will announce your significance to everyone you encounter. The moment arrives. Horses move forward. Gates close behind you. The only home you've ever known recedes into morning mist, becoming memory rather than present reality. You resist the urge to look back, focusing instead on the road ahead that leads toward France, toward Prince Philip, toward whatever life awaits a 13-year-old girl who's just become a political bridge between kingdoms. The journey to Dover takes 3 days through English countryside that grows more unfamiliar with each mile. You sleep in abbeys along the route, grateful for clean beds, even if they harbour the usual medieval complement of small residence. The accommodations are the best available, but best remains a relative term when travelling in the 13th century. Dover appears on the horizon like a promise and a threat combined. The massive harbour bustles with activity as ships prepare for various crossings, their masts forming a forest of wood and rope against the grey sky. Somewhere among them waits the vessel that will carry you across the channel toward your French future. The smell hits you first as your party approaches the harbour. Salt air mixed with fish, tar, and the indefinable stench of a medieval port where sewage runs directly into the water. Then comes the noise. Sailors shouting instructions, gulls screaming overhead, the constant creaking of wooden ships straining against their moorings. "That's our vessel," Lord Bertrand announces, pointing toward a ship that looks smaller than you'd hoped given the expanse of water it must cross. The Sainte Marie, one of the finest in the royal fleet. It doesn't inspire confidence. Medieval seafaring operates on principles of hope and prayer rather than engineering and safety. You're about to entrust your life to wind, weather, and human muscle power for a crossing that could take anywhere from half a day to several days, depending on conditions. Boarding involves being half carried by sailors down slippery steps to a small boat that bobs alarmingly on the choppy water. The little craft rides the waves like a cork, occasionally taking spray over its sides that soaks the hem of your travelling gown. By the time you reach the Sainte Marie, you're already cold, damp, and feeling distinctly unwell. Your cabin is barely large enough for a narrow bed and a small chest for immediate necessities. Alice and Lady Isabel will share the cramped space with you, while your other ladies must find shelter on deck, under whatever protection they can arrange. Privacy, that elusive concept that's been absent throughout your medieval princess life, reaches new levels of impossibility aboard ship. The crossing usually takes about half a day with favourable winds, Lady Isabel explains while helping you settle on the narrow bed. Try to sleep if you can. It makes the journey more bearable. Sleep proves impossible as the ship leaves Dover's relative shelter and encounters the full force of the English Channel. The vessel pitches and rolls with each wave, creaking ominously as if the wooden hull might split apart at any moment. Your small cabin reeks of tar, salt, and the lingering evidence of previous passengers' seasickness. Within an hour, you're violently ill, joining most of the women in your party in miserable solidarity. Alice holds your hair back as you retch into a bucket, too sick to feel embarrassed by the undignified display. Lady Isabel, surprisingly, seems unaffected by the motion. "I've made this crossing many times," she explains, offering you a cloth dampened with vinegar to clean your face. One becomes accustomed to it eventually. You can't imagine ever becoming accustomed to this particular form of torture. Medieval medicine offers little help for seasickness beyond peppermint oil, which you can't keep down anyway, and the dubious comfort of knowing the journey must eventually end. The crossing takes longer than expected, as spring storms force the captain to adjust course repeatedly. What should have been half a day stretches into a full day and night of rolling, pitching agony. You drift in and out of consciousness, aware only of constant motion, the sounds of straining timbers, and sailors shouting instructions above the wind. Medieval sea travel claims countless lives every year. Ships sink without warning, bodies disappear beneath grey waves, and the political machinery simply adjusts to accommodate such losses. Another princess would be found for Prince Philip if necessary. Another alliance would be negotiated. Your individual survival, despite all the ceremony surrounding your journey, remains ultimately expendable in the grand scheme of international relations. But finally, mercifully, the motion changes. The ship steadies somewhat as voices outside sound more confident and less urgent. "We're approaching Calais," Lady Isabel announces, opening the cabin door to let in a blast of salt air. "Come, Princess. You should be seen on deck as we arrive." The French coastline resolves from a grey smudge on the horizon into definite land, then into the specific details of Calais harbour. The welcoming party waiting at the dock is impressive enough to penetrate even your seasick haze. Local nobles, church officials, royal guards in French livery, banners fluttering in the stiff breeze. It's a calculated display of respect for your rank and demonstration of French wealth and organisation. You're half carried off the ship, still weak from the crossing, toward a litter that waits to transport you to accommodations that have been prepared. The Château de Calais proves smaller than your father's primary castle, but more ornate, with elaborate stone carvings decorating its facade that speak of different artistic traditions and cultural values. Inside, you're escorted to chambers that have been readied for your arrival. Fresh rushes cover the floors, a fire burns welcomingly in the hearth, and most miraculously, a tub of steaming water awaits. After the horrors of the Channel crossing, this simple luxury feels like heaven itself. The hot water, scented with lavender and rosemary, soothes your salt-chafed skin while Alice works patiently to restore your appearance to something resembling royal dignity. Clean, dressed in fresh clothes, and fed light broth that your recovering stomach can actually tolerate, you begin to feel almost human again. But there's no extended recovery time. Barely an hour after your arrival, Lady Isabel informs you that local nobility awaits an audience. They've come to pay respects to their new princess, she explains, already selecting appropriate jewellery to complement your hastily chosen gown. Such meetings are expected, unavoidable parts of medieval diplomatic protocol. You put on the familiar mask of royalty, arranging your features into the pleasant but dignified expression that's expected. The Château's great hall fills with French nobles whose names you immediately forget in your exhaustion, but whose bows and curtsies you acknowledge with appropriate graciousness. Your French proves adequate for the formal exchanges, though your accent clearly marks you as foreign. Small victories in the larger campaign of cultural adaptation that will define your immediate future. After what feels like hours, but is probably only one, you're finally allowed to withdraw and rest. Tomorrow brings the journey to Paris, to the French court, to Prince Philip, and the beginning of your actual married life. Tonight offers your last opportunity for relative privacy and calm before entering the complex world of French court politics, where every word and gesture will be scrutinized for political significance. As you settle into the unfamiliar bed in this foreign castle, you find yourself thinking about the girl who woke up in England just days ago. She feels like someone you once knew rather than someone you recently were, already fading into memory as new experiences overlay familiar patterns of thought and feeling. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, new people to meet and impress, different customs to learn and navigate. But tonight, wrapped in French blankets in a French castle, you allow yourself a moment of quiet reflection on the journey that's brought you this far and the uncertainty of what lies ahead. The transformation from English princess to French wife has begun in earnest. Whether it will ultimately prove successful remains to be seen, but failure isn't really an option when the political stability of two kingdoms hangs in the balance. Sleep comes more easily tonight. Exhaustion finally overcoming anxiety as your body recovers from the Channel crossing. Your dreams mix familiar English faces with imagined French scenarios, creating impossible combinations that somehow feel more real than the waking world you're learning to navigate. Tomorrow will bring new realities, new challenges, new opportunities to succeed or fail in your role as living diplomatic instrument. But for now, you rest in the space between one life and another, gathering strength for whatever comes next in this medieval world that sees princesses as valuable commodities rather than young women with their own hopes and fears. Morning in the Château de Calais arrives with servants bustling about preparations for your departure to Paris. The journey ahead isn't a casual ride through familiar countryside, but a carefully orchestrated procession designed to display your importance while moving you efficiently toward your final destination. French roads, you discover, present their own unique challenges compared to the English paths you've known. Your travelling party has grown considerably since leaving England. French nobles have joined the procession, adding their own retinues and expectations to an already complex operation. The politics of seating arrangements in carriages, the order of horses in the column, even the precedence of banner displays, all require careful negotiation by diplomats whose job is making sure no one feels slighted. The French countryside rolls past your litter window in an endless succession of fields, villages, and manor houses that look almost familiar, yet somehow foreign. The architecture differs subtly from English building styles. Church spires twist in slightly different patterns. Peasant cottages cluster around village greens that follow unfamiliar layouts. Even the landscape itself seems to speak a different language, one you'll need to learn along with everything else. Your escorts stop at predetermined castles each evening, where local lords have prepared elaborate welcomes for their future princess. These aren't casual overnight stays, but formal diplomatic events, where you're expected to charm, impress, and demonstrate the value of the alliance your marriage represents. Each evening brings new names to memorize, new customs to navigate, new opportunities to succeed or fail publicly. The meals served during these stops showcase regional French specialties that your English palate struggles to appreciate. Sauces prepared with herbs you can't identify, meats cooked in styles your castle's kitchen never attempted, wines that taste nothing like the ones you're accustomed to drinking. Food becomes another reminder of how thoroughly foreign your new life will be. Your French continues improving through necessity rather than choice. Conversations at dinner tables, exchanges with servants, discussions about travel logistics, all require communication in a language that still feels awkward on your tongue, despite months of intensive instruction. Each successful interaction builds confidence. while mistakes leave you feeling exposed and inadequate. Lady Isabel proves invaluable during these encounters, smoothly covering your occasional linguistic stumbles while providing subtle guidance about French social expectations. Her presence offers stability in the constant stream of new faces and unfamiliar protocols. Though you're increasingly aware that her loyalty belongs to your future husband's family rather than to you personally. The nights bring little privacy or comfort. Medieval travelling accommodations, even for royalty, prioritize security and basic shelter over luxury or personal space. You share chambers with your ladies, sleep on unfamiliar mattresses, wake to the sounds of foreign voices preparing for another day's journey toward an uncertain future. Your body adapts slowly to the constant movement and irregular schedule. Medieval transportation takes a physical toll that modern people can barely imagine. Hours of jolting over rough roads leave you stiff and sore. Limited opportunities for bathing or changing clothes make you acutely conscious of your appearance when facing nobles who judge everything about your presentation. But perhaps more challenging than physical discomfort is the psychological pressure of being constantly observed and evaluated. Every interaction becomes a test of your suitability as a French princess. Every conversation carries diplomatic weight. Every gesture gets analysed for what it reveals about your character, breeding, and potential loyalty to French interests. The weather complicates everything, as spring storms turn roads into muddy quagmires that slow progress to a crawl. Your party seeks shelter in a monastery smaller than planned, forcing you to share cramped quarters with far more people than comfort allows. The intimate space breaks down some of the formal barriers that usually separate different ranks, creating unexpected moments of human connection. Alice, Margaret, and even Lady Isabel huddle together for warmth in the monastery's guest chamber, sharing stories and observations about the journey that they'd never exchange under normal court conditions. These brief interludes of relative informality provide relief from the constant pressure of maintaining royal dignity in public settings. "The French certainly like their ceremonies," Margaret observes quietly, while helping you prepare for sleep on a straw mattress that would horrify your mother's ladies. "Every stop brings more speeches and formal presentations." "It's how they demonstrate respect," Lady Isabel explains, her voice softer than usual in the intimate darkness. "But also how they evaluate your responses. They're learning about you just as you're learning about them." You find yourself wondering what conclusions these French nobles are drawing from their observations. Do they see strength or weakness in your careful politeness? Wisdom or inexperience in your measured responses? Potential or limitation in your still developing language skills? The journey resumes with improved weather, but increased anxiety as Paris grows nearer. Each mile brings you closer to meeting Prince Philip, to consummating your marriage, to beginning the real work of producing heirs and securing alliances. The abstract future you've been preparing for becomes increasingly concrete and unavoidable. Your escorts begin pointing out landmarks that mark the approach to the French capital. Church spires visible on the horizon, bridges that cross tributaries of the Seine, manor houses belonging to nobles whose names you recognize from diplomatic correspondence. The anticipation builds like storm clouds, heavy with possibilities both promising and threatening. Lady Isabel intensifies your final preparations, reviewing protocols for meeting the French king, reminding you of proper forms of address for various nobles, drilling you on the complex hierarchy that governs court interactions. These aren't casual social skills, but survival tools for navigating one of the most sophisticated and potentially dangerous courts in medieval Europe. "Remember," she instructs during a rest stop just hours from Paris, "the French court values subtlety above directness. What isn't said often matters more than what is. Watch, listen, and speak carefully. Your words will be remembered long after you've forgotten saying them." The city of Paris appears gradually, starting with outlying settlements and growing denser as your procession approaches the walls. The sheer size overwhelms you, having spent your entire life in smaller English towns and rural castles. This is urban sophistication on a scale you've never encountered, with implications for court life that you can barely begin to imagine. Notre Dame Cathedral rises above the cityscape like a stone prayer made manifest, its spires reaching toward heaven with an architectural ambition that takes your breath away. The palace complex sprawls along the riverbank, its walls and towers speaking of power that dwarfs even your father's impressive strongholds. The welcoming party that meets you at the city gates exceeds every previous reception in scale and grandeur. Hundreds of nobles in elaborate court dress, church officials in rich vestments, musicians playing fanfares that echo off stone walls, banners and tapestries creating rivers of colour that transform the entrance into theatre. And there, at the centre of it all, mounted on a magnificent white destrier and dressed in blue and gold that proclaims his royal status, sits the young man who is already your husband-in-law, but whom you're meeting for the first time. Prince Philip of France, scholarly, pale, slender, nothing like the warrior princes of romantic literature, but somehow more real and therefore more intimidating than any fictional hero. He dismounts as your litter is lowered, approaching with measured steps that suggest careful consideration rather than eager anticipation. When he stops before you and bows, you catch your first clear glimpse of his face and find yourself looking into blue-grey eyes that seem to be evaluating you just as intensely as you're studying him. "Princess," he says in French, his voice carrying easily over the crowd noise. "Welcome to Paris. I trust your journey was not overly difficult." The moment has arrived. Your new life begins with this first exchange, these first words between husband and wife, who are strangers to each other, despite the legal bonds that already connect them. Your response will be analysed by hundreds of witnesses, reported throughout the French court, remembered as the beginning of a relationship that could shape the future of two kingdoms. "Thank you, Your Highness," you reply, your French pronunciation carefully modulated to minimise your English accent. The journey was long but made worthwhile by its destination. A diplomatic answer that reveals nothing while acknowledging everything, exactly the kind of response Lady Isabel has trained you to give. Prince Philip's slight nod suggests approval, though his expression remains carefully neutral in the way of medieval royalty who've learned to guard their true thoughts. He offers his arm to escort you through the city gates, a gesture that's both ceremonial courtesy and practical support for legs still unsteady from days of travel. As you place your hand on his sleeve, feeling the rich velvet beneath your fingers, you step forward into your French future with whatever courage you can muster. The procession through Paris becomes a carefully choreographed display of royal magnificence designed to impress both foreign visitors and French subjects. Citizens line the streets, craning for glimpses of their prince's English bride, their faces showing curiosity mixed with the natural skepticism people feel toward outsiders who arrive claiming important positions. You smile and wave as you've been taught, maintaining the serene expression that projects confidence while concealing the anxiety churning in your stomach. Every face in the crowd represents someone who will judge your worthiness to join their royal family, your suitability to someday influence French policy, your capacity to produce the heirs who will inherit these streets and buildings. The palace gates finally swing open to reveal courtyards that exceed your most ambitious expectations. Where English castles prioritize defense and functionality, French royal architecture seems designed primarily to overwhelm visitors with displays of wealth and sophistication. Gardens, fountains, carved facades, windows fitted with actual glass rather than simple shutters. Everything speaks of resources and refinement that make your father's court seem provincial. Prince Philip maintains appropriate conversation during your entrance, pointing out features of particular interest while managing to convey information without seeming to lecture. His manner suggests genuine desire to help you feel welcomed rather than merely performing required courtesies, though you're careful not to read too much into politeness that might be purely diplomatic. Your new chambers have been prepared with obvious care, furnished in styles that acknowledge your English origins while incorporating French elements you'll need to grow accustomed to. English books sit on French tables, familiar tapestries hang beside unfamiliar artwork, creating a space that's neither fully foreign nor completely comfortable. I had your English volumes placed where you could easily reach them, Prince Philip mentions, gesturing toward the reading area. Lady Isabel mentioned your fondness for literature. The thoughtfulness surprises you, suggesting attention to details about your preferences that goes beyond the basic diplomatic briefings he would have received. You look at him with new curiosity, wondering what other aspects of his character might prove different from your expectations. You discussed my interests with Lady Isabel, you ask, then immediately worry that the question sounds too direct for French court standards. A slight flush colours his pale cheeks. I wanted to know something about my bride beyond political reports and treaty negotiations, he admits. Lady Isabel has been quite informative about your character and accomplishments. Before you can explore this intriguing revelation further, the demands of court protocol intervene. You must rest and prepare for the evening's formal presentation to the French king, the ceremony that will officially introduce you to the nobles who will surround your new life. Prince Philip bows politely before withdrawing, leaving you with your ladies and the task of transforming yourself from travel-weary girl into impressive French princess. The afternoon passes in intensive preparation, guided by French ladies whose names you're still struggling to remember, but whose efficiency impresses you despite their obvious role as observers reporting to your husband's family. They dress you in French court fashion, arrange your hair according to French customs, select jewellery that sends appropriate messages about your status and allegiances. When evening arrives and you're summoned to the Great Hall for your formal presentation, you feel as ready as intensive preparation can make you. But readiness, you're learning, remains relative when facing situations that have no real equivalent in your previous experience. Tonight will determine how French court society receives you, whether they accept you as worthy of their prince or view you as inadequate foreign import. The Great Hall blazes with more light than you've ever seen in one space, hundreds of candles and oil lamps creating an almost magical atmosphere that makes everything seem larger and more significant. French nobles in elaborate dress fill every available position, their faces reflecting curiosity, judgment, and the complex calculations that drive court politics. Prince Philip escorts you to the throne where his father, the King of France, waits to receive his new daughter-in-law officially. The king studies you with eyes that have evaluated countless political arrangements over decades of rule, and you sense immediately that this man views you primarily as a diplomatic asset whose value will be determined by your performance in the role he's assigned you. The formal presentations begin, an endless parade of names and titles that blur together as you struggle to maintain appropriate responses while absorbing the overwhelming sensory input of your first major French court ceremony. Each noble who approaches carries their own agenda, their own hopes for how your marriage might benefit their family's interests, their own concerns about foreign influence in French politics. Your French proves adequate for the required exchanges, though you remain acutely conscious of your accent and occasional grammatical uncertainties. Every successful interaction builds confidence, while mistakes feel magnified by the importance of first impressions in a court, where reputation matters more than almost anything else. The feast that follows showcases French culinary sophistication that makes English court meals seem simple by comparison. Course after course of elaborate dishes prepared with expensive spices and exotic ingredients, wines from regions whose names you recognize from diplomatic correspondence but have never tasted before. The complexity overwhelms your English palate, while demonstrating the wealth and refinement of your new homeland. Seated beside Prince Philip at the high table, you find yourself grateful for his occasional quiet translations when rapid French conversations exceed your comprehension. His consideration surprises you repeatedly, suggesting genuine concern for your comfort that goes beyond mere politeness toward a political necessity. Tomorrow, I'll show you the palace gardens, he mentions during a brief lull in the formal conversations surrounding you. They're particularly beautiful in spring. I'd enjoy that very much, you respond, surprised to discover you mean it genuinely rather than simply offering the expected polite acceptance. As the evening progresses through multiple courses and elaborate entertainments, you begin sensing the undercurrents that flow beneath the surface courtesy. Certain nobles watch you with expressions that suggest they're cataloguing your every response for future reference. Others seem to be evaluating your potential influence over their prince and how that might affect their own positions. Lady Isabel, seated nearby with other senior court ladies, occasionally catches your eye with subtle nods of approval or nearly imperceptible warnings about particular individuals requiring careful handling. Her guidance proves invaluable in navigating social complexities that you're only beginning to understand. But beneath all the political maneuvering and social calculation, you're increasingly conscious of the physical reality that awaits you after this feast concludes. Tonight, finally, your marriage will be consummated in the most intimate and irreversible way possible. The political alliance will be sealed through the joining of your body with Prince Philip's, transforming legal arrangement into physical fact. The anxiety you've been suppressing throughout the day sharpens to near panic as servants begin clearing the final course and nobles start making their farewells. Lady Isabel appears at your side with the other French ladies who will assist in your preparation for the marriage bed. Their expressions professionally neutral despite the momentous nature of what they're about to facilitate. The time has come to complete your transformation from English princess to French wife, to fulfill the primary purpose for which you've been trained since childhood, to discover whether the scholarly prince who has shown you unexpected kindness will prove as considerate in private as he has been in public. Your wedding night awaits, along with all the hopes and fears that have accumulated during your journey from childhood innocence to adult responsibility. Whatever happens next will determine not just your personal happiness, but the success of the alliance between kingdoms that has cost so much effort to arrange. The girl who woke up in England just days ago feels like a distant memory as you rise from the feast table to begin the final chapter of your transformation into French royalty. The chamber prepared for your wedding night feels both intimate and ceremonial, designed specifically for this moment when political alliance becomes physical reality. Unlike your personal quarters, this room carries the weight of royal tradition. Its massive bed draped with curtains displaying both English and French heraldic symbols, a visual reminder that what's about to happen transcends personal experience. The French ladies assigned to prepare you move with practiced efficiency, their faces maintaining professional detachment as they begin the ritual undressing that transforms you from public princess to private bride. This isn't the casual assistance you're accustomed to from Alice, but something far more formal, witnessed by women whose role extends beyond mere service to include verification that proper protocols are followed. Layer by layer, your court finery is removed and carefully folded, each garment representing another barrier between your public role and the intimate reality you're about to face. The elaborate French gown, the jewelry that proclaimed your status, the headdress that marked your rank, all disappear until you're left in the simple linen shift that will serve as your wedding night attire. Your hair is unbraided and brushed until it falls loose around your shoulders, a symbol of the virginal state you're about to surrender in service of dynastic necessity. Rosewater is dabbed at your wrists and throat, the sweet scent intended to please your husband while marking this transition from maiden to wife in the most ancient and binding way possible. Through all of this preparation, you remain oddly detached, as if watching someone else being readied for someone else's marriage. The physical sensations feel muted, filtered through layers of training that have taught you to endure whatever duty requires without complaint or visible distress. A soft knock announces the arrival of the priest, who will bless this union before it becomes physically complete. Father Benedict enters with kind eyes and gentle manner, speaking traditional words over the marriage bed while making the sign of the cross above the embroidered coverlets. His blessing invokes divine favor on the joining of bodies that will hopefully produce the heirs both kingdoms desperately need. The French ladies withdraw with deep curtsies, leaving only Lady Isabel seated discreetly in a shadowed corner where she can provide the witness that medieval law requires. Royal marriages must be consummated with proof to prevent later claims of invalidity that could destabilize entire kingdoms. Your most intimate moment will be observed by someone whose job is ensuring its political legitimacy. Another knock, softer this time. Prince Philip enters wearing a simple robe, his usually composed manner showing signs of nervousness that mirror your own anxiety. He looks younger somehow in the candlelight, less like the diplomatic figure from dinner, and more like the 17-year-old boy he actually is beneath all the royal expectations. "Princess," he says quietly, then corrects himself. "I mean, please call me Philip when we're private. At least when circumstances allow." The small gesture toward informality touches you unexpectedly, this attempt to create some measure of personal connection within the rigid framework of political marriage. You nod, not trusting your voice to remain steady if you try to speak his name aloud in this intimate setting. He approaches the bed slowly, as if trying not to startle you, and sits carefully on the edge while maintaining respectful distance between your bodies. The mattress dips slightly under his weight, creating a small intimacy that feels both natural and terrifying given what everyone expects to happen next. "I know this is difficult," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're strangers to each other, and you're very young. I want you to understand that while I know my duty, I have no wish to cause you pain or fear." The consideration in his words breaks through your careful composure, bringing tears to your eyes before you can stop them. Medieval princesses aren't supposed to cry, especially not on their wedding nights, but the accumulated stress of leaving home, crossing the channel, meeting new people, and now facing this final intimacy overwhelms your trained restraint. Philip looks alarmed at your tears, clearly uncertain how to respond to emotional displays that weren't covered in his own diplomatic education. After a moment's hesitation, he reaches out tentatively and takes your hand, his fingers cool and smooth against your palm. "Perhaps we could simply talk tonight," he suggests, glancing toward Lady Isabel, who watches impassively from her corner. "Get to know each other a little before we fulfill all our obligations. It's not what anyone expects." Medieval wedding nights are supposed to proceed directly to consummation, witnessed and verified, the marriage secured without delay. But Philip seems genuinely concerned about your readiness, your comfort, your emotional state, rather than just the political requirements everyone else prioritizes. "I'd like that very much," you whisper, grateful beyond words for this unexpected reprieve from immediate intimacy with a virtual stranger. So instead of the swift physical union that protocol demands, you and Philip spend hours in quiet conversation. He tells you about his studies in philosophy and astronomy, subjects considered too complex for most women, but which he discusses with you as if your understanding matters. You share your love of reading, of stories that transport you beyond the constraints of royal duty into worlds where different choices seem possible. He speaks of his favorite places in the palace, promising again to show you the gardens where he finds peace from court pressures. You describe the English countryside you've left behind, the seasons there, the way morning light fell across familiar stones you'll never see again. Slowly, carefully, you begin building the foundation of familiarity that might someday grow into something deeper. Lady Isabel maintains her silent vigil, her presence a constant reminder that this deviation from normal procedure could create complications. The marriage must be consummated to be legally valid, but she makes no move to hurry the process, perhaps recognizing the wisdom in allowing some emotional connection to develop first. Hours pass while candles burn lower, and the palace settles into nighttime quiet. Your initial terror fades replaced by cautious curiosity about this thoughtful young man who seems as constrained by his royal role as you are by yours. He asks about your journey, your impressions of France, your hopes for the future with genuine interest rather than mere politeness. Finally, when the night is half gone and duty can no longer be postponed, Philip sighs quietly and glances toward Lady Isabel. "We should proceed," he says formally, his scholarly manner returning. "The marriage must be properly completed." You nod, understanding the FL necessity, even as anxiety utters back to life in your chest. But it feels different now, less acute, tempered by hours of conversation that have transformed Philip from an abstract concept into a real person who at least seems to view you as more than just a political convenience. What follows is still uncomfortable, still strange, still painful in ways your limited preparation couldn't fully anticipate. But Philip proves as gentle as his earlier consideration suggested, apologetic about the necessity, quick and careful with your obvious inexperience. The physical joining that seals your marriage and secures the alliance feels more like an awkward duty shared between reluctant partners than the romantic union of fairy tales. When it's finished, the political requirements satisfied, and your virginity officially surrendered in service of international relations, Philip doesn't immediately withdraw as protocol would allow. Instead, he remains beside you in the unfamiliar bed, his presence oddly comforting despite everything that's just occurred. "Rest now," he says quietly, adjusting the covers around your shoulders with unexpected tenderness. "You've travelled far and endured much today. Tomorrow we can begin learning what our life together might become." You drift towards sleep, exhausted by the emotional and physical demands of completing your transformation from English princess to French wife. The last thing you register before unconsciousness claims you is Philip's voice, very soft, saying something to Lady Isabel that sounds like instructions to take special care of you during the adjustment period ahead. Morning arrives with Alice's familiar touch gently waking you, though the chamber feels different in daylight, less ceremonial and more like a space where two people might actually learn to coexist. Your body aches in new ways that remind you of the previous night's consummation. But the worst fears you'd carried about wedding nights prove to have been more terrifying in anticipation than in reality. Philip has already risen and departed for his morning duties, leaving behind only a small gift on the table beside your bed. A book of French poetry, carefully selected to include pieces that might help you understand the language's more subtle beauties, while introducing you to cultural treasures you wouldn't have encountered in England. The gesture touches you more than elaborate jewellery might have, suggesting attention to your personal interests rather than mere displays of wealth or status. Perhaps this marriage, arranged for purely political reasons, might develop into something approaching companionship if both of you continue making such efforts. Your French ladies arrive to help you prepare for your first full day as an officially married princess. Their manner slightly different now that your transformation is complete. You're no longer a foreign visitor, but a permanent member of the French royal family, with all the opportunities and obligations that status entails. The day ahead will bring formal presentations to nobles who couldn't attend last night's ceremonies, meetings with household staff who will serve your daily needs, and the beginning of your education in French court protocols that will govern your public behaviour for years to come. But tonight's successful navigation of wedding night anxieties gives you confidence that other challenges might prove equally manageable, as Alice helps you dress in clothes that now belong to your French wardrobe, rather than remnants from your English past. You find yourself looking forward to Philip's promised tour of the palace gardens. The prospect of spending time outdoors, away from the constant scrutiny of court life, appeals to you more than any formal ceremony or diplomatic reception. Your reflection in the polished metal mirror shows a face that looks older than it did just yesterday, marked by experiences that have accelerated your transition from girlhood to womanhood, in ways both subtle and profound. The girl who crossed the channel in terror has begun transforming into someone who might actually succeed in this role she never chose, but must now embrace. The morning meal in the Great Hall provides your first opportunity to observe French court dynamics as an insider rather than a visiting curiosity. Nobles who seemed intimidating during last night's formal presentations now appear more approachable, their conversations revealing the same kinds of personal concerns and political calculations that drive court life everywhere. Philip joins you at the high table, his manner showing none of the awkwardness you might have expected after the intimacies you shared. Instead, he seems genuinely pleased to see you, asking about your rest and whether your chambers provide everything necessary for your comfort. His consideration continues impressing you with its apparent sincerity. "The gardens are particularly lovely this morning," he mentions, while servants bring the day's first course. "If you're feeling recovered from your journey, perhaps we could walk there after breaking our fast." The suggestion sounds wonderful, offering escape from the formal constraints of indoor court life into spaces where conversation might flow more naturally. You accept with genuine enthusiasm that seems to please him, creating a small moment of connection that several nearby nobles notice and file away for future reference. Your new life in France has officially begun, marked by a wedding night that proved less traumatic than feared, and morning interactions that suggest possibilities for genuine partnership within the constraints of political marriage. Whether these promising beginnings will develop into lasting compatibility remains to be seen, but at least the foundation seems stable enough to build upon. The challenges ahead will test every aspect of your preparation and character. Court politics will require constant vigilance and diplomatic skill. The pressure to produce heirs will intensify as months pass, without pregnancy. Cultural differences will create ongoing friction despite your best efforts at adaptation. But this morning, sitting beside a husband who shows unexpected kindness, you feel cautiously optimistic about your ability to not just survive, but perhaps even find some measure of happiness in this life that was chosen for you. The French court watches your every move with interest that will never entirely fade, evaluating your success in adapting to their customs and expectations. Your words will be analysed, your expressions interpreted, your choices dissected for their political implications. Privacy will remain elusive, personal preferences secondary to diplomatic necessity, individual desires subordinate to dynastic requirements. Yet within these rigid constraints, small spaces exist for human connection, personal growth, and even modest forms of self-determination. Your marriage to Philip has begun with mutual respect and consideration that could evolve into deeper partnership given time and continued effort from both parties. As you prepare to leave the Great Hall for your promised garden tour, you catch Lady Isabel watching you with an expression that might almost be maternal pride. She's guided you through the treacherous transition from English princess to French wife, and your successful navigation of wedding night protocols reflects well on her instruction and your own adaptability. The day stretches ahead full of new experiences, fresh challenges, and opportunities to continue proving your worthiness for the role you've inherited. Each successful interaction strengthens your position. Each cultural misstep provides learning opportunities. Each small kindness from Philip builds the foundation for whatever your marriage might become. Your transformation from medieval English princess to French royal wife represents just the beginning of a longer journey toward finding your place in this complex world of court politics, international diplomacy, and personal relationships conducted under constant public scrutiny. The girl who left England in terror has taken her first steps toward becoming the woman who might someday influence the fate of kingdoms through her intelligence, adaptability, and carefully cultivated political skills. The gardens prove even more spectacular than Philip's modest description suggested. Stepping through the palace doors into carefully manicured spaces that blend French architectural precision with nature's wild beauty feels like entering an entirely different world from the stone corridors and formal chambers you've been navigating. Gravel paths wind between beds of spring flowers that create rivers of colour flowing around marble fountains and sculptured hedges. The air carries scents you've never encountered before, exotic blooms imported from distant lands, mixed with familiar herbs that remind you unexpectedly of home. Birds chirp in ornamental trees whose branches have been trained into geometric patterns that speak of decades of patient cultivation. This section was designed by my great-grandfather, Philip explains, guiding you along a path that leads toward a secluded alcove where stone benches offer respite from walking. He believed gardens should provide spaces for contemplation as well as beauty. The thoughtfulness behind the design becomes apparent as you explore further. Hidden corners perfect for private conversation, shaded walkways ideal for hot summer days, open spaces where winter sunshine can warm visitors during colder months. Every element serves both aesthetic and practical purposes, creating environments that enhance rather than merely display wealth and sophistication. It must be wonderful to have grown up with access to such beauty, you observe, settling onto a bench that overlooks a reflecting pool where golden fish swim lazily beneath lily pads. English gardens tend toward more practical purposes. Herbs for the kitchen, vegetables for the table. Philip sits beside you, maintaining appropriate distance while creating an atmosphere of comfortable companionship. Beauty serves practical purposes too, he suggests. Peace of mind, inspiration for difficult decisions, relief from the pressures that come with our positions. His words reveal understanding of the burdens that accompany royal birth, the constant awareness that personal desires must yield to dynastic necessities. In this quiet garden setting, away from watching eyes and listening ears, you glimpse the person he might be without the constraints of court protocol and political expectations. Do you come here often? You ask, genuinely curious about how he finds solitude in a life that seems even more public than your own had been in England. Most mornings when duties allow, he admits. Books and gardens provide the only reliable escape from the endless meetings, ceremonies and negotiations that fill most days. I suspect you'll understand that need for retreat once you've experienced more of French court life. The warning in his gentle words doesn't escape you. Your brief taste of formal presentations and diplomatic meals represents just the surface of what you'll need to navigate as a permanent member of this sophisticated but treacherous social ecosystem. The real challenges lie ahead in the daily grind of managing relationships, avoiding political traps, and maintaining your position while adapting to foreign customs. Lady Isabel mentioned that French court politics require particular subtlety, you venture, testing whether Philip will offer practical guidance beyond mere courtesy. His expression grows more serious, and he glances around to ensure you're truly alone before responding. Everyone here pursues their own agenda, often at the expense of others. Friendships shift based on advantage, alliances form and dissolve according to immediate benefit. Information becomes currency more valuable than gold. The bluntness surprises you, this direct acknowledgement of realities that polite conversation usually conceals. How does one survive in such an environment? Carefully, he says with a slight smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Watch more than you speak, listen for what isn't said, trust sparingly, and verify everything. Most importantly, remember that your primary loyalty must be to France now, regardless of your English birth. The reminder stings despite its necessity. You'd known intellectually that marriage would require transferring allegiance from your father's kingdom to your husband's, but hearing it stated so plainly makes the emotional cost more concrete. Everything familiar, everyone you've loved, all the traditions that shaped your early years must now take secondary importance to French interests. I understand my duty, you respond, though the words taste bitter on your tongue. Philip's expression softens slightly. Duty doesn't require you to forget where you came from, only to serve where you are now. Your English perspective might actually prove valuable in ways you haven't yet considered. Before you can ask what he means, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupts your private conversation. A servant appears on the path, bowing deeply before delivering a message that summons Philip to an urgent meeting with his father's council. The moment of intimacy dissolves, as royal obligations reassert their priority over personal desires. "I apologize," Philip says, rising from the bench with obvious reluctance. "Affairs of state rarely accommodate personal schedules. Perhaps we could continue our conversation this evening, if court duties permit." You nod understanding, having lived your entire life according to similar interruptions. Royal children learn early that individual preferences must yield to the larger machinery of government and diplomacy. The garden suddenly feels less peaceful, more like a temporary refuge that could be invaded at any moment by the demands of political necessity. As Philip hurries toward his obligations, you remain in the alcove for a few minutes longer, trying to absorb the implications of your new position. The conversation has revealed both encouraging possibilities and sobering realities about your future in France. Philip seems genuinely interested in developing a partnership beyond mere political convenience, but the world you've entered operates according to rules that prioritize advantage over affection. Lady Isabel appears eventually to escort you back inside, her timing suggesting she's been monitoring your whereabouts without intruding on private moments. "Did you enjoy your tour of the gardens, Princess?" "Very much," you reply honestly. Prince Philip was most informative about their history and design. "I'm pleased to hear it," she responds, though her neutral tone reveals nothing about whether she approves of your husband's attention to your comfort. "This afternoon brings meetings with the household staff who will serve your daily needs. It's important to establish proper relationships from the beginning. The remainder of your day unfolds in a series of introductions and explanations designed to integrate you into the complex hierarchy that governs palace life. Head cooks who will prepare your meals, seamstresses who will maintain your wardrobe, grooms who will care for your horses, guards who will ensure your safety, all present themselves with varying degrees of enthusiasm for serving an English princess. Some seem genuinely welcoming, perhaps hoping that foreign influence might bring positive changes to established routines. Others maintain professional courtesy while clearly reserving judgment about your worthiness for the position you've inherited. A few display barely concealed skepticism about whether someone so young and inexperienced can successfully navigate the challenges ahead. You respond to each introduction with appropriate graciousness, while mentally cataloguing personalities, potential allies, and possible sources of future difficulty. Medieval households operate according to intricate webs of personal relationships, professional rivalries, and shifting loyalties that can make daily life either smooth or nightmarish, depending on how skillfully they're managed. The head seamstress, Marie, proves particularly helpful in explaining French fashion preferences that differ significantly from English styles. "French ladies favour more fitted garments," she explains while examining the dresses you brought from home. "The silhouettes emphasise grace and elegance rather than the fuller cuts preferred across the Channel." Her critique isn't unkind, but it reinforces the message you've been receiving since arriving. Everything about your appearance, behaviour, and preferences requires modification to meet French expectations. The process of cultural transformation goes far deeper than language lessons, extending to fundamental aspects of self-presentation that you'd never consciously considered. By evening, your head swims with new information, unfamiliar names, and complex protocols that govern everything from meal service to correspondence handling. The sheer volume of detail required for basic functioning in this environment overwhelms you, despite months of preparation that seem thorough at the time. Dinner provides another opportunity to observe court dynamics while practicing the social skills that will determine your long-term success. You're seated among French ladies whose conversations flow in rapid patterns that challenge your linguistic abilities, while revealing the underlying currents of ambition, jealousy, and calculation that drive their interactions. Lady Catherine de Montfort, daughter of a powerful duke, seems particularly interested in establishing friendship with the new princess. Her manner appears genuine, but Lady Isabel's subtle warnings about trusting too quickly make you cautious about accepting overtures at face value. Everyone here wants something, whether immediate advantage or future consideration when your influence grows. "Your French has improved remarkably since your arrival," Lady Catherine observes during a lull in the broader conversation. Have you found our customs very different from English traditions? The question seems innocent enough, but you sense deeper currents underneath. Your response will be analysed for evidence of homesickness, criticism of French ways, or inadequate appreciation for the honour of joining their royal family. Every casual exchange carries diplomatic weight in this environment, where personal becomes political. France has proven even more sophisticated than I expected, you reply carefully. I'm grateful for the patience everyone has shown while I learn your ways. It's a safe answer that acknowledges French superiority while expressing appropriate humility about your own limitations. Lady Catherine nods approvingly, though whether she's pleased by your diplomacy or disappointed by your caution remains unclear. The evening entertainment features musicians performing pieces that showcase French cultural refinement, their complex harmonies and intricate instrumentation far surpassing anything you heard in English courts. The music speaks to artistic traditions that stretch back centuries, representing achievements in beauty and sophistication that justify French pride in their cultural superiority. Philip rejoins the gathering after his council meetings, taking his place at the high table with an expression that suggests his afternoon involved challenging discussions. When your eyes meet across the hall, his slight smile conveys both apology for the earlier interruption and pleasure at seeing you again, small gestures that begin building the foundation of marital understanding. As the formal evening draws to a close, you find yourself looking forward to whatever private time might be available for continued conversation with your husband. The morning's garden tour provided promising glimpses of compatibility that could develop into genuine partnership given sufficient time and mutual effort. But before retiring to your chambers, protocol requires formal farewells to the assembled nobles, each exchange another opportunity to reinforce positive impressions while avoiding the missteps that could damage your reputation. Medieval court life never truly stops, even during moments that appear casual or personal. Your ladies escort you through the nighttime rituals that prepare you for sleep, their efficient movements and quiet conversation, creating a cocoon of familiar routine within the foreign environment. Alice's presence proves particularly comforting, her English voice and familiar touch providing continuity with the life you've left behind. "How are you finding your new home, my lady?" she asks quietly, while brushing your hair with the same gentle strokes she's used for years. "Overwhelming," you admit honestly, knowing Alice can be trusted with unguarded responses. Everything requires such careful consideration. Every word, every gesture, every expression gets analysed for meanings I never intended. "It will become more natural with practice," Alice assures you. "You've always been quick to learn new things. This is just another skill to master." Her confidence in your adaptability provides comfort during moments when the challenges seem insurmountable. Alice has known you since childhood, understanding your strengths and weaknesses better than anyone else in this foreign court, where relationships remain tentative and motivations unclear. A soft knock interrupts your preparations. Philip enters after receiving permission, his manner showing the same considerate formality that marked your wedding night interactions. The physical aspects of marriage no longer carry the terror they once did, but intimacy with someone who remains essentially a stranger requires ongoing adjustment. "I wanted to apologize again for this afternoon's interruption," he says, settling into a chair near the fireplace rather than immediately approaching the bed. "Council meetings rarely proceed according to schedule." "I understand completely," you reply, meaning it. "Royal duty takes precedence over personal preferences. I was taught that principle from childhood." "Yes, but marriage should offer some refuge from constant obligation," he observes. "At least between husband and wife when circumstances allow privacy. The sentiment touches you with its implicit promise that your relationship might develop beyond mere political convenience. Medieval marriages rarely prioritize emotional connection, but Philip seems genuinely interested in building understanding that could make shared life more bearable for both of you. "I enjoyed our conversation this morning," you venture. Your insights about court life were illuminating. There will be much more to discuss as you encounter various personalities and situations, he promises. The French court rewards those who understand its unwritten rules while punishing those who violate them through ignorance or carelessness. The warning carries weight beyond mere advice, suggesting that your survival in this environment depends on mastering complexities that go far beyond formal protocols. Success requires reading human nature, anticipating political shifts, and navigating relationships that shift, according to advantage rather than affection. Will you help me learn these rules? You ask, then immediately worry the question sounds too needy or dependent. Of course, he responds without hesitation. Your success reflects on both of us, and beyond that, I find myself genuinely hoping you'll be happy here. The admission surprises you with its apparent sincerity. Medieval princes aren't expected to concern themselves with their wives' emotional well-being beyond basic courtesy. Yet Philip seems to view your happiness as a legitimate goal rather than merely an incidental benefit if political objectives are achieved. As he joins you in the marriage bed, his manner remains as considerate as it was during your first intimate encounter. The physical aspects of your relationship may never become passionate, but they're developing into something comfortable and respectful that makes the required duty bearable rather than traumatic. Your second night as Philip's wife passes more peacefully than your first, marked by growing familiarity that reduces anxiety while building the foundation for whatever your marriage might eventually become. When morning arrives, you feel cautiously optimistic about your ability to adapt to French court life with his support and guidance. The days that follow establish patterns that will govern your new existence. Mornings often begin with brief private conversations over meals, opportunities to discuss the day's obligations, and share observations about court personalities. These exchanges prove invaluable for understanding the complex dynamics that drive palace politics. Afternoons typically involve formal activities designed to display your successful integration into French royal life. Receiving visitors who come to pay respects, attending ceremonies that celebrate various feast days, participating in entertainments that showcase court culture to foreign ambassadors. Each event requires careful attention to protocol, while providing opportunities to build relationships with potentially useful allies. Evenings bring the most challenging social interactions, elaborate dinners where conversation flows in patterns that conceal as much as they reveal. Learning to participate effectively in these verbal chess matches requires skills that go far beyond basic language fluency, extending to cultural knowledge, political awareness, and psychological insight that takes years to develop. But gradually, incrementally, you begin finding your footing in this sophisticated environment. Your French improves to the point where rapid conversations no longer leave you completely lost. Your understanding of court hierarchies deepens enough to avoid the most obvious social mistakes. Your relationship with Philip evolves from polite cooperation towards something approaching genuine partnership. The transformation from English princess to French royal wife continues day by day, conversation by conversation, challenge by challenge. Each small success builds confidence for facing larger obstacles, while every mistake provides lessons that prevent similar errors in future situations. Your medieval princess life in France has truly begun, marked not by fairy tale romance, but by the patient work of building a sustainable existence within constraints that prioritize duty over desire, political necessity over personal preference. Whether this foundation will ultimately support happiness remains to be seen, but at least it appears solid enough to bear the weight of whatever challenges lie ahead. The girl who crossed the channel in terror just weeks ago is disappearing, replaced by a young woman learning to navigate one of Europe's most complex courts with increasing skill and confidence. The process isn't complete, may never be complete, but progress provides hope that survival might eventually become something more satisfying than mere endurance. The months that followed your wedding brought new challenges that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. Medieval royal life operates according to unspoken expectations that become glaringly obvious only when you violate them. Every gesture carries meaning, every word gets dissected for political implications, and every silence speaks volumes to people trained in reading the subtleties of court communication. Your education in French politics began with seemingly innocent conversations that revealed themselves as elaborate tests. Lady Catherine de Montfort, whose friendship you'd cautiously begun accepting, would casually mention other nobles during your morning walks, watching carefully for your reactions to names she dropped like stones into still water. The Duchess of Burgundy seemed quite interested in your thoughts about English wool exports, she might observe, then pause to see whether you understood the deeper implications. Burgundy controlled key trade routes. Your casual comments about commerce could be interpreted as policy positions, potentially complicating diplomatic relationships your husband's father had spent years carefully balancing. These conversations taught you to weigh every word before speaking, to consider not just what you meant, but how others might interpret your meaning. The spontaneous responses that had served you well in England became dangerous luxuries in a court where verbal missteps could have consequences lasting generations. Philip proved invaluable during this learning period, though his help came wrapped in warnings that made your stomach clench with anxiety. My cousin's wife made an offhand comment about Italian fashions 3 years ago, he mentioned during one of your garden walks. She's still being reminded of it every time trade negotiations with Venice require delicate handling. The pressure was suffocating. You found yourself rehearsing conversations before they happened, practicing neutral responses to questions that might contain hidden traps. Sleep became elusive as your mind churned through the day's interactions, analyzing each exchange for mistakes that might come back to haunt you. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of your new life was the constant awareness that your primary value lay in your womb rather than your mind. Every month that passed without pregnancy brought increasingly pointed questions disguised as concern for your health. Court physicians appeared regularly with herbal concoctions designed to increase fertility, their examinations intimate and humiliating reminders of your fundamental purpose. The princess looks pale, nobles would murmur within your hearing, their words carrying implications that your failure to conceive reflected poorly on the alliance your marriage was supposed to cement. Perhaps the English climate didn't prepare her constitution for bearing French heirs. These comments stung more than outright criticism might have, their subtle cruelty designed to undermine your confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. Medieval court politics operated through such verbal daggers, cutting remarks that drew blood, while allowing their speakers to claim innocence if confronted directly. Philip showed unexpected sensitivity to these pressures, though his own position required him to maintain public composure regarding your failure to immediately produce the sons everyone expected. In private, he offered reassurance that felt genuine despite the political necessity driving it. "You're barely 14, he would remind you during moments when the weight of expectation threatened to crush your spirits entirely. "My own mother didn't bear her first child until she'd been married nearly 2 years. These things happen according to God's will, not courtiers' schedules." His kindness provided comfort during the darkest moments, when failure felt like a personal inadequacy rather than simple biological timing. Medieval medicine understood little about conception beyond folklore and superstition, leaving you vulnerable to advice that ranged from harmless to potentially dangerous. The court's herbalist, an ancient woman named Marguerite, whose knowledge commanded respect even from skeptical physicians, became a frequent presence in your daily routine. Her remedies involved complex rituals that felt more like witchcraft than medicine, though she insisted everything she prescribed aligned with church doctrine. "Drink this at moonrise," she would instruct, handing you concoctions that tasted like liquid punishment. "Sleep with lavender beneath your pillow. Wear this amulet against your skin, and pray to St. Margaret during your monthly courses." The combination of Christian devotion and pagan tradition that characterized medieval healing left you uncertain whether you were following God's will or dabbling in practices the church might condemn. Meanwhile, your education in French culture continued through experiences that revealed how different your new homeland truly was from England. The sophistication that had initially impressed you began feeling oppressive as you discovered that elegance came with rigid rules about everything from table manners to religious observance. French noble ladies, you learned, were expected to display accomplishments that went far beyond the basic skills you'd mastered in England. Your needlework, perfectly adequate for English standards, looked crude compared to the intricate designs French women created with threads so fine they seemed spun from light itself. Your musical abilities, which had earned praise at your father's court, sounded provincial next to the complex harmonies French ladies performed with instruments you'd never seen before. In France, we believe refinement reflects spiritual development, Lady Isabel explained during one particularly frustrating lesson where your attempts at advanced embroidery kept tangling into hopeless knots. The patience required for perfect stitches cultivates the patience needed for perfect devotion to God and family. The philosophy sounded beautiful in theory, but felt punishing in practice. Hours spent hunched over elaborate needlework left your back aching and your eyes strained, while the constant pressure to meet impossible standards of perfection wore away at your confidence like water-eroding stone. Your relationship with the French ladies assigned to your household remained complicated by the knowledge that their primary loyalty belonged to Philip's family, rather than to you personally. They served you with professional competence while reporting your every action to people whose approval determined your long-term survival in this foreign court. This surveillance extended to your correspondence with England, letters home that were read by multiple people before being sent, and answers that arrived only after careful review by French officials. The isolation from your birth family felt complete and permanent, severing emotional connections that had sustained you through childhood's challenges. Your mother's letters, when they finally reached you, carried news that felt like reports from another world. Your younger brother had begunsemanship that would prepare him for the cane in his military training, learning swordplay, and her rightly career denied to you because of your gender. Your sister had been betrothed to a Scottish lord, another political marriage that would scatter your family across Europe in service of diplomatic necessity. Remember your duty to France, your mother wrote in carefully neutral language that revealed nothing of her personal feelings. Honor your new family as you once honored us, and trust that God's plan unfolds according to his wisdom rather than our understanding. The words provided little comfort during moments when homesickness threatened to overwhelm your determination to succeed in your new role. Medieval communication moved so slowly that events in England might have changed completely by the time news reached you in France, leaving you perpetually out of step with the lives you'd left behind. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, France began feeling less foreign and more like home. Your French reached the point where you could think in the language rather than translating from English, allowing for more natural conversations that revealed personalities beneath the formal courtesy everyone maintained in public. Some French nobles proved genuinely welcoming once they decided you posed no threat to their own positions. The Count of Toulouse, an elderly man whose military service had earned him universal respect, took particular interest in your education about French history and customs. Every foreign bride faces the same challenges, he told you during a feast where his kindness provided refuge from less friendly attention. My own grandmother came from Castile and spoke of feeling lost for her first year at court. But she became one of our most beloved queens, remembered for her wisdom in mediating disputes between rival factions. His stories offered hope that adaptation was possible, that other women had successfully navigated the transformation from foreign princess to accepted royal wife. The examples he shared revealed strategies for building alliances, managing conflicts, and gradually earning the trust that would make your position secure. The changing seasons brought new opportunities to demonstrate your growing competence in French court life. The autumn hunting season, traditionally a time when nobles gathered to display their skills and negotiate political arrangements, provided your first major test of how well you'd learn to navigate complex social dynamics. Medieval hunting wasn't simply about killing animals for food or sport. It was elaborate theatre where everything from your choice of mount to your reaction to successful kills would be interpreted as statements about your character, courage, and suitability for royal status. The wrong response to a particularly bloody moment could mark you as weak, while excessive enthusiasm might suggest unwomanly bloodlust. Philip spent hours preparing you for these events, explaining the unspoken protocols that governed behaviour during different types of hunts. When the heart is brought down, you should look pleased but not excited, he instructed. Show appropriate appreciation for the hunter's skill without appearing to enjoy the animal's suffering. The distinctions felt impossibly subtle, requiring you to calibrate emotional responses according to complex social calculations rather than genuine feeling. Medieval noble life demanded constant performance, with authenticity becoming a luxury you could rarely afford in public settings. Your first major hunt proved both terrifying and exhilarating. Mounted on a spirited palfrey whose training exceeded your own riding skills, you struggled to maintain composure while keeping pace with experienced hunters whose casual expertise made your careful preparation look amateurish. The forest rang with horn calls, barking hounds, and shouted commands as the hunting party pursued their quarry through terrain that challenged even skilled riders. Your horse, sensing your nervousness, became increasingly difficult to control as the excitement mounted and other mounts began competing for position. When the magnificent stag was finally cornered and killed, you managed to produce the appropriate expression of pleased appreciation while fighting nausea at the sight of so much blood. The ritual presentation of the animal's heart to honor the most successful hunter required you to smile graciously while internal revulsion threatened your composure. But your performance apparently satisfied the assembled nobles, who nodded approval at your deportment during what they considered a crucial test of royal character. The successful navigation of hunting protocols marked another milestone in your gradual acceptance by French court society. Winter brought different challenges as shortened days, and brutal cold confined court life to indoor activities that intensified social pressures. The elaborate entertainments designed to alleviate seasonal tedium became battlegrounds where personal rivalries played out through seemingly innocent games and competitions. Your education in court intrigue accelerated during these months, when boredom made nobles particularly susceptible to gossip, rumour, and the kind of manufactured drama that could destroy reputations overnight. You learned to recognise the warning signs that preceded character assassinations, the subtle shifts in conversation that indicated someone was about to become the target of coordinated social destruction. Lady Margaret de Clermont, wife of a powerful baron, made the mistake of criticising the Queen's choice of music for a particular feast. Within days, stories circulated about her alleged extravagance, her questionable associations with Italian merchants, her failure to properly supervise her children's religious education. The campaign was so skillfully orchestrated that she found herself effectively exiled from court before understanding what had triggered the assault on her reputation. Never underestimate how quickly fortunes can change here, Philip warned, as you watched Lady Margaret's disgrace unfold with horrifying efficiency. Today's favourite can become tomorrow's pariah through a single careless word or misinterpreted gesture. The lesson reinforced your determination to maintain the careful neutrality that had served you well so far, though you increasingly understood that permanent safety would require building a network of genuine allies rather than simply avoiding enemies. Medieval court survival demanded active relationship management, not merely passive caution. Your opportunity to demonstrate real value to French interests came unexpectedly during a diplomatic crisis that threatened to destabilize the carefully balanced relationships Philip's father had spent years constructing. English merchants had apparently violated trade agreements with Flemish cities, creating complications that could escalate into military conflict if not handled delicately. Your unique position as an English-born French princess suddenly became an asset rather than a liability. The king summoned you for private consultation about English commercial practices, seeking insights that might help resolve the dispute without resorting to warfare that would be costly for everyone involved. Your father's court surely discussed these Flemish arrangements, the king suggested, his manner more respectful than you'd previously experienced. What considerations might influence English negotiating positions? The conversation marked a turning point in your relationship with French royal authority. For the first time, your English origins were being treated as valuable knowledge rather than suspicious foreign influence. Your careful responses helped shape diplomatic strategies that ultimately prevented military conflict, while securing favourable terms for French interests. The success of these negotiations elevated your status considerably, proving that your marriage offered benefits beyond the purely symbolic alliance everyone had initially emphasised. Nobles who had previously treated you with polite condescension began seeking your opinions about English policies and potential responses to various diplomatic initiatives. This newfound respect came with its own pressures, as your words now carried weight that could influence international relationships. Every casual comment about English customs might be interpreted as policy guidance, requiring even greater care in managing conversations that had previously seemed merely social. But the recognition also provided satisfaction that had been missing from your earlier experiences in France. Instead of feeling like decorative foreign curiosity, you began functioning as genuine contributor to French political success. Your intelligence and cultural knowledge were finally being valued alongside your reproductive potential. The spring of your second year in France brought the long-awaited news that your monthly courses had failed to arrive. After so many months of disappointment and increasingly pointed questions about your fertility, the possibility of pregnancy created excitement throughout the court that felt both wonderful and terrifying. The royal physician confirmed what your body had already suggested, pronouncing you officially with child amid celebrations that seemed to encompass the entire kingdom. Church bells rang in thanksgiving, nobles sent congratulatory gifts, and even the weather seemed to cooperate with sunshine that transformed the palace gardens into scenes of almost supernatural beauty. Philip's reaction combined obvious relief with genuine pleasure, his scholarly reserve cracking to reveal emotions he rarely displayed in public settings. "I'm so pleased," he whispered during a private moment stolen between official congratulations. "Not just for the dynasty, but for you. I know how difficult the waiting has been." His consideration touched you deeply. This acknowledgement that your personal feelings mattered alongside the political implications of successful conception. Many medieval husbands would have focused entirely on dynastic benefits without sparing thought for their wives' emotional experiences. The pregnancy transformed your daily routine completely, as elaborate precautions were implemented to protect both your health and the precious heir you carried. Your diet was carefully regulated, your activities restricted, your exposure to potentially harmful influences minimized according to medical theories that combined ancient wisdom with contemporary superstition. You were forbidden from riding horses, climbing stairs unnecessarily, or attending events where crowds might jostle you accidentally. Even your reading material was censored, with exciting or disturbing books banned lest they affect the child's development through sympathetic influence that medieval medicine considered scientifically proven. The restrictions felt oppressive after months of gradually gaining freedom to participate more fully in court life. But you endured them willingly for the sake of the child who represented your ultimate security in French society. A successful birth, particularly of a male heir, would establish your position permanently while providing the dynasty with its future. Your relationship with Philip deepened during these months of waiting, as shared anticipation and concern for your welfare created intimacy that had been missing from your earlier interactions. He spent more time in your apartments, reading aloud when you were confined to bed rest, discussing plans for your child's education that revealed his hopes and dreams for the future. "I want him to understand both kingdoms," Philip shared during one of these quiet conversations, "to appreciate English traditions alongside French customs, so he can truly serve as a bridge between our peoples." The vision of your child as a living connection between the lands of your birth and marriage provided meaning that transcended personal satisfaction. This baby would embody the alliance your wedding had symbolized, carrying both bloodlines forward into a future where ancient enmities might finally be resolved through family bonds. As autumn approached and your delivery time drew near, preparations intensified around creating the perfect environment for royal childbirth. The Queen's chambers were readied according to traditions that stretched back centuries, with religious relics positioned to provide spiritual protection and experienced midwives summoned from across the kingdom. The birthing chamber was prepared like a sacred space, its windows covered to prevent harmful air from entering, its floors strewn with herbs thought to ward off infection, its walls hung with tapestries depicting successful royal births from previous generations. Every detail was calculated to ensure the best possible outcome for both mother and child. Your English ladies, led by faithful Alice, would be permitted to attend the birth alongside French midwives, whose loyalty to the royal family was absolute. The combination of familiar faces and expert medical care provided as much comfort as medieval childbirth could offer, though the dangers remained terrifyingly real. Medieval women died in childbirth with heartbreaking frequency, their bodies overwhelmed by complications that modern medicine could easily prevent or treat. Queens and peasants faced the same risks during labour, their royal status providing better care, but no guarantee of survival when things went wrong. As your time approached, you found yourself thinking often about your mother, wondering whether she had felt the same mixture of anticipation and terror before your birth. Her letters had become more frequent and affectionate as news of your pregnancy spread, though the distance between you made her support feel frustratingly abstract. "Remember that women have been bearing children since Eve," she wrote in her most recent letter. "Trust in God's plan and the wisdom of experienced midwives. Your duty to France requires courage now more than ever before." The words provided some comfort, though they also reinforced the enormous pressure riding on your successful delivery. This child represented more than personal fulfillment or even dynastic succession. The baby would be living proof that your marriage had achieved its fundamental purpose, justifying all the sacrifices and adaptations your new life had required. Philip's nervousness became more apparent as your delivery date approached, his usual scholarly composure cracking under the weight of impending fatherhood combined with political implications of the birth. Medieval men were typically excluded from childbirth entirely, leaving them powerless to influence outcomes that could determine their family's future. "I've arranged for the best midwives in France," he assured you repeatedly, his anxiety evident despite attempts to project confidence. "And prayers are being said in every church across the kingdom for your safe delivery and the child's health." Yes, the knowledge that an entire nation was praying for your successful labour felt both supporting and overwhelming. So many hopes and expectations focused on your ability to safely bring this child into the world, transforming what should have been a personal experience into a matter of international significance. But despite all the pressure and preparation, the actual arrival of labour began simply and quietly, with your waters breaking during morning prayers as you knelt in the castle chapel. The warm rush of fluid down your legs announced that the moment everyone had been waiting for was finally at hand. And there you have it, the brutal, unvarnished truth about what it really meant to be a medieval princess. No fairy godmothers, no happy endings, just cold stone chambers, political pawns, and survival against impossible odds. These weren't the pampered princesses of our childhood stories. They were teenagers shipped off to foreign lands, forced into marriages with strangers, expected to produce heirs or face the consequences. They navigated treacherous courts where a single wrong word could destroy reputations, where privacy didn't exist, and where their bodies belonged to everyone except themselves. Yet somehow, many of them not only survived, but found ways to carve out spaces of agency within systems designed to control them. They became diplomats, power brokers, and bridges between kingdoms. They learned languages, mastered politics, and occasionally even found genuine partnership with the husbands they'd been forced to marry. The medieval princess life was a masterclass in resilience, adaptation, and the quiet courage it takes to build a meaningful existence when every major decision about your life has been made by someone else. These young women faced challenges that would break most of us, and they did it while maintaining the grace and dignity their positions demanded. So the next time you see a Disney princess singing about her dreams, remember the real medieval princesses who lived in a world where dreams were luxuries they couldn't afford, but who somehow found ways to shape history anyway. Until next time, stay curious about the stories they don't tell in fairy tales.